Hello, everyone. We usually have members joining us from across the globe. Hence, I'd like to start by saying a very good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. A warm welcome to everyone who have joined us for this much-awaited session on the wonderful world of marine life by Mr. Deepak Apte, Managing Director, Srishti Conservation Foundation. I'm sure all of us are eager to listen to him, especially as this is the first session we are having on marine life. Until now, it's been about the flora and fauna of the land. So without further ado, let's quickly go back to our chairman, Dr. Sanjay Krishna, and then to the speaker himself. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Rajiv. Geetanjali, over to you to quickly introduce our friend.
Yeah. Hi, hello everyone, and welcome again to RFWC's awesome speaker series. First of all, with immense pleasure and gratitude, I would like to thank Deepak Apte for having agreed to take this session on marine landscape in the middle of enjoying his painting and gardening pleasures in Ratnagiri, the mango landscape of our country. Deepak Apte holds a doctorate in zoology with specialization in marine ecology. He received post-graduation degrees in the field of zoology from University of Bombay, Integrated Coastal Zone Management from AIT Bangkok, and Marine Policy from Duke University, USA. He is currently Managing Director at Srishti Conservation Foundation. Previous to this, he completed his 28 years tenure at BNHS or Bombay Natural History Society, of which he was Chief Operating Officer and Director for 8 years. Known as straight talker during his tenure, he also mentored many, including me, to charter and pursue the love for wildlife in our vocations and take it as a career option in various formats. His wildlife career spans over 3.5 decades and contributed greatly to develop several policies at national and international level. As a principal scientist, he has implemented more than 50 major projects, over 100 training programs, and written over 100 popular articles and editorials and 35 technical reports. Besides traversing length and breadth of India's wildlife and seascapes, he has also traveled to about 50 countries for scientific and academic work, as well as presenting and participating in the international seminars and conferences. His work in Lakshadweep archipelago has recently paved way to establish 3 community reserves under Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, totaling 675 square kilometers of coral reef areas. He is a recipient of the prestigious Green Oscar Whitley Award and 3 Whitley Continuation Awards for his work on coral reefs and giant clams in Lakshadweep Islands. He has also been awarded a Global Fellowship in Marine Conservation by Duke University, USA. He is a fellow of LEAD India and International Visitors Program of USA. He is recipient of a Sundara Green Teacher Award and Taru Lalwani Rotary Award for Environmental Conservation. So we have a Rotary connection there. A well-received author, he has, to his credit, 5 books and 90 scientific papers in the field of coastal and marine diversity, including Seashells of India and Field Guide to the Marine Life of India. As a director of BNHS, he was part of many key committees of Government of India and various state wildlife bodies. An accomplished underwater photographer with over 5,000 hours of diving experience, he also has over 3 decades of work experience working across states and various landscapes and seascapes of India. So here we have Deepak Apte. The floor is yours now. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I got a bit of a backache, so I'm using this very old, chair. Can't sit straight for
no problem.
long. So, can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
Is it full screen?
No, you have to make it full screen.
Is it? I have made it. Can you see?
Yeah, now it's yeah.
Okay, all right. I think there's a bit of a lag, so I will go a bit slow. All right. Thank you, Geeta, for this lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to see you after really a long time. And I have one more Rotary connection. I have got another Rotary award in Thane, I think in 2012.
Okay.
And I have been giving lectures to Rotary clubs on many occasions. I did, I think, last lecture for Rotary London. I don't know which branch of that, but all right. Okay. So I'm going to speak in a very general language. I understand people are from very different background, so I'm not going to speak too much technical aspect of this subject. I will essentially give a glimpse of what exists underwater and why we need to look at the life underwater in a current climate context, which of course is now great concern globally. I think sea gives us lots of indications of what's wrong with our climate. And I think many of our climate solutions rest with the sea. As we know today, bulk of the focus of mitigating climate change is land-based. And we have a very limited land available that everyone try to do something in terms of either plantations or what kind of mitigation measures. We don't recognize that 70% of Earth is ocean. And ocean has got a huge potential for climate stabilization, carbon sequestration, etc., etc. 90% of our oxygen come from ocean. We believe that planting trees is going to solve problem for oxygen, but I think we are wrong. It's the ocean which produces 90% of breathing oxygen that we have today through phytoplankton and the entire life cycle that goes inside ocean. Therefore, I think understanding ocean is an absolute must if you have to solve problems of land. We will never be able to solve problems on land minus ocean. And therefore, I think blending knowledge, even in academics, of marine sciences is going to be absolutely important in years to come, because that's where our solutions for climate mitigations are. There obviously are, it's a very complex subject. It's not as easy as I have presented, but yet I think the best solution for climate mitigation will eventually emerge out of our work in coastline marine areas. And therefore, I think it's a great opportunity for our young generation to invest a time into understanding this subject, studying this subject, and also prudent for decision makers, governments, etc., to invest, build infrastructure for academic institutions so that we really progress fast on this subject, so as to deal with the real crisis of climate that we are facing now. Marine biodiversity of India is well, it's a very popular subject, but not many really knows much about that. Most of the studies are within academic domain are very, very limited. By and large, they are confined only within intertidal areas where we have easy access. In subtidal areas, most of the information is coming through very, very limited institutions today that work in India. Globally, of course, there is much profound knowledge coming up with advanced research. Now, India is blessed, I think, with more than 8,000 kilometers of coastline distributed across 9 coastal states and 4 union territories. It has got more than 20% of the coastline essentially around Andaman, Nicobar and Lakshadweep islands, which are again coral reef ecosystems, which are very, very important in terms of marine biodiversity. Our EEZ, exclusive economic zone, is massive, is about 2.02 million square kilometer. And not surprising, therefore, that India ranks among one of the key biodiversity countries, which is among 12 mega biodiversity countries globally. There are reasons why we rank such a high in terms of biodiversity. First, of course, we are a tropical country. Obviously, we have got relatively much higher diversity compared to cold water regimes. But if you look at in terms of the habitats that we have in India, right from Gujarat to Kerala and from Tamil Nadu to West Bengal, we have diversity of habitats. We have essentially listed only about 9 critical habitats, which are absolutely vital for conservation of marine and coastal biodiversity. But besides these 9 habitats, I think there are more than 300 plus ecologically sensitive areas spread across east and west coast of India that we need to recognize as a biodiversity hotspots. Now, these key areas, of which 2 are in Gujarat, Gulf of Kutch and Gulf of Khambat. Gulf of Kutch, again, very, very interesting place. Those who want to understand marine biodiversity, I think for them, you should put your foot in Gulf of Kutch to understand diversity, because this is where, if you go slightly east, northeast of Gulf of Kutch, that's where Arabian Sea ends. It's called Makaran area, and it borders Pakistan. And the entire influence of Arabian Sea where it ends. So the tidal regimes in Gulf of Kutch are very, very different. So Gulf of Kutch fauna is quite similar to the fauna that you get into the Red Sea and Persian Gulf compared to the other part of the continental India. So Gulf of Kutch again is a very, very interesting place for any marine biologist to understand and to study. There are also very different characteristics. I will not go into deep into the science of that, but reefs here are of very different character and nature, and much more resilient to elevated sea surface temperature than all other reefs that you will see on east and west coast of India. Gulf of Khambat again is a mudflat mangrove combination. In Maharashtra, we have got Malwan Marine Sanctuary, which is south of where I am currently based in Ratnagiri. Lakshadweep Islands, again, archipelago, union territory, one of the finest coral reefs that you will see. In Tamil Nadu, we have got Gulf of Mannar, very popular area. In fact, the earliest research started in marine and coastal biodiversity started from Gulf of Mannar. And the history of research in Gulf of Mannar dates back almost 100-150 years. Then we have Bhitarkanika in Orissa and Sundarban in West Bengal. And then we have got Andaman and Nicobar. So besides these 9, which I believe are absolutely vital habitats, there are more than 300. I have not shown that in map. Map will look quite congested otherwise, but beautiful areas spread across these coastal states and UTs. And one of the reasons why we have such a huge species assemblage is the habitat diversity. And if you see the range of habitat that you will see when you travel from both east and west coast and to the islands, you will see different kinds. Even intertidal areas, for example, if you can see my cursor, if it is moving on the left side top image, that's the intertidal area from Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat, where tidal amplitudes are really, really massive. Then there is another intertidal area, which is the central image, that's from Andaman, North Andaman. Again, a very, very interesting intertidal area. We have got some fascinating reefs from Lakshadweep, very shallow reefs, what we call lagoon reefs. Both images on right-hand side, top image and the middle image. They are very, very shallow lagoon areas, very, very beautiful hard coral, acropora, especially dominated lagoons that you see. Seagrass, again, fascinating ecosystem. Diversity is relatively less compared to the reefs, but it's a very, very important ecosystem. Then we have got very interesting mangrove formations. Both east and west coast of India. In Gujarat, we have got very stunted mangrove dominated essentially with Avicennia species. But as you move south from Gujarat, you come to Maharashtra, then to Goa, to Karnataka, the height of the trees will keep on increasing. And you go to Tamil Nadu, and then Bhitarkanika, which I showed as a key habitat, is essentially for mangrove. We have got 36 species of mangroves in that one single area, highest number of mangrove species we'll see out there. Andaman Nicobar also has got really beautiful mangrove. But we also has got underwater forests, which nobody really know much about it. For example, we have got some spectacular underwater forest of sargassum, a seaweed. If you come to Ratnagiri in winter time, between December, January, February, and then you will see these really gigantic strands of sargassum in very shallow water of 2 meter, 3 meter. Then we have got whole range of intertidal habitats that exist, rock pools of Konkan, while as very shallow tidal pools of Gulf of Kutch, sand dunes across east and west coast of India. So combination of all these habitats, and every state has got a mixture of these various kinds of habitat. Actually, one of the reasons why we have got really spectacular biodiversity. We really don't know much about it. We hear very little about it, because there are not many people who go underwater. But if you are a diver and if you like wildlife photography, I think underwater photography is one domain that you should explore. I'm going to run through 6 or 7 slides just to show you how colorful life there underwater. And look at, for example, these colorful fishes. I think these are some of the most spectacular colors that you will ever see in nature, besides, of course, birds on land. We have got more than 1,500 species that exist in Indian coastline of the fishes. Many of them, of course, are reef-associated fishes, besides those commercially harvested. We have got echinoderms. Echinoderms, again, we have got 5, very common types, as we know, are sea cucumbers, sea urchins, feather stars. These are some of the most common names that you may have encountered. They also are equally colorful. Fascinating aspect about echinoderms, I'll speak slightly later at the second half of the presentation. And then we have got shrimps and crabs. Look at how colorful crabs and shrimps we have underwater. All these species you will encounter if you just spend 5 days. For example, we were talking before the lecture, you want to go to Lakshadweep. I think a 5 or 6 day trip to Lakshadweep, you will be able to see some of these spectacular animals, probably more than 200-300 species in a short span of 3 or 5 days. That's the rich wealth we have in our marine wilderness that we have. Even seashells, they are again spectacularly colorful. Both shells, the animals with shells, what we call it as gastropods, like cowrie, which I'm showing here. Plus, there are shellless mollusks, what we call soft-bodied, like the sea slugs, for example. Everything what you see in water in marine realm is colorful, and they communicate essentially through this wonderful color. The only thing that we need to understand is that, and I will illustrate you through the next slide. Now, these are the corals, soft and hot corals that we will see. We have got about 450 plus species of hard corals in India. The maximum diversity, of course, in Andaman Nicobar. But if you see this second row, 2 images on left, one with the red soft coral you see, another with a very, pale blue uniform color. Now, that's how, when you dive without any artificial illumination, most of the marine life in sea will look this uniform pale green blue in nature, because below 10 meter, all the red, yellow, and all those color spectrum will get absorbed below at 10 meter. And below 10 meter is all very, very uniform colors. You will see in many of these images here in the central image, soft coral, the left-hand side lower image, coral without artificial illumination. The moment you put light, flash, artificial light on this, these are the real colors which you'll see on the left-hand side. Bright orange, red color of soft corals. So if you really want to see the colors when you're diving underwater, it is absolutely must that you carry underwater torch to see, so that you can put this artificial light to see the true colors of the animals. Even when you're doing photography, you have to use artificial illumination to get these true colors of the animals. Otherwise, it's very, very monochromatic below 10 meters when you dive. And unfortunately, we also rank very high in terms of number of species getting endangered in marine realm. And there are many reasons for that. Of course, there are accidental deaths of these megafauna with propeller heads of ships, or they drown in gillnet fish, etc., etc. Nonetheless, it's not a great sign to have so many species, and declining populations of many of those species is not something that we should be proud for. Thankfully, there are certain species with very concerted efforts by governments and institutions are showing some signs of recovery, which I'll speak a little bit about that in couple of these 2 slides. Now, if you see, there are these 4 charismatic species that we have in India. On left-hand side, where my cursor is a dugong, it used to be once relatively common mammal. It's mostly from Gulf of Mannar in Tamil Nadu and Andaman Nicobar. Today, we probably understand that the Indian population of this species is anywhere between 150 to 300 individuals. Most of them are remaining in Gulf of Mannar and Andaman Nicobar. We have a small relic population of, we really don't know the number of it, but we occasionally get the carcass dead animals washed ashore in Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat. We believe it may be the population which moved between the Red Sea all the way Persian Gulf into Gulf of Kutch using the entire Makaran shallow areas. But we have absolutely no certainty but based on whatever information we have from fishing community plus transboundary coordination, it appears that it's a small population. Then there is another image on the lower hand side, left lower hand side is a whale shark. It's a remarkable story of recovery of these species in India. It was once hunted in huge numbers, and there were records as high as 800 to 900 whale sharks hunted in a day in various parts of the country together. I think Mike Pandey's first film, Shows of Silence, really threw light on the plight of this large, majestic shark that we have. And thereafter, I think Government of India, Government of Gujarat, Indian Coast Guard, and then various NGOs, Tata Chemicals company as one of the lead sponsor for this project. They did relentless work for 10 years to community awareness. Then Murari Bapu, who was one of the very respected religious preacher in Gujarat, started intervening and started speaking for conservation of the species. And within, I think, the moment Murari Bapu came in picture, giving message about saving the species, almost instantaneously hunting of these species in Gujarat has stopped. Gujarat today is a safe haven for this species. Now, of course, this species is protected all across east and west coast of India. Very little hunting happened for this species. So this species certainly has been saved from an absolute annihilation through commercial harvest of which used to happen 2 decades ago. So if people and if communities decide, we certainly can bring back, if not every species, we can bring back many species from the brink of extinction. And we need to work with communities to achieve that. On right hand side, we have got humpback whale on the top. We don't have really large number of whales in India. Some of them use this as a transit areas. We have got some common whales like bride's whales, which keep visiting our shores in near shore areas. But we don't have the numbers that we usually see in cold waters. Then right hand side lower image is leatherback turtle, again a very charismatic, one of the largest sea turtle. It's usually seen in Andaman Nicobar. They nest in Andaman Nicobar. Last, I think, few months ago, there was a record of this turtle got entangled in along the coast of Ratnagiri, somewhere near Ratnagiri or Maharashtra, and then was released by the fishermen. So, and then there are all kinds of other species which I can talk about. The upper left image, Tadacna maxima, or the giant clams, which Gitanjali introduced me. My entire last 3 decades work is on these species. They're really majestic animals. I'll speak about that slightly later. But I would say that we have got species from gigantic size of blue whales, which you will see in the lower image, and to the tiniest, very pretty right hand side, if you see upper image where my cursor is a very tiny sea slug. It measures only about 3 centimeter. It's one of the narrowly distributed species, what we call it as point endemic. You will see this in only about 300 square meter area in Gulf of Kutch. Near Pochitra. That's the global distribution of the species we are talking about, just 300 square meter. We have been working on these species for almost last 3 decades, and we are trying to figure it out whether we can explore whether we can repopulate them in very nearby small pools. Otherwise, it has a great risk of absolute extinction in a very short span of time. So having this species in endangered species is not a great is something that we should be proud for, and therefore we need to really do very concentrated efforts on first understanding what the species problems are. Then dealing with those problems will become relatively very easy. Now, for example, sharks, you can see this oceanic silvertip, white tip shark, very, very beautiful species. Most of these sharks are hunted for the fins. You will see these fins here, whether it's dorsal fin or whether it's a tail fin. They are very, very popular for fish soup in Southeast Asian countries. And earlier, of course, all the other parts of the shark, they used to dispose of only cutting the fins. Now they found the use of other body parts. Unfortunately, these are large pelagic sharks. They, breed at a very slow pace. They also grow at a very slow pace. So unregulated harvesting of these species will bring their population so low that biological productivity will almost be, non-recoverable. So I think for every species that we talk about, unless we understand the complex science of these species, it will be very, very difficult for us to take very focused effort for its conservation. But Mother Nature, besides, of course, these, are uh, that's how situation is today, good or bad. But Mother Nature, I think there are some very fascinating aspects of Mother Nature. And I think that's what really attracted me to this subject during my school days, when I used to hear these stories from, a fisherman community, not necessarily in a sense the way I'm presenting now, but they have their own style and ways to explain how beautiful life underwater is and their experiences when they go out for fishing. Now, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, when Honorable Prime Minister has launched this campaign, which was one of, I think, the most essential campaign to make our beaches clean, our cities clean. Our oceans are cleaned by some of these absolutely beautiful ambassadors. If you see this tiny bubbler crab on the right-hand side image, it's a really tiny crab. It's about 2 centimeter, 3 centimeter. And when you go on the sandy shores during low tide, you'll find these beautiful designs and hundreds of these holes. Some of them are large, some of them are big. All these holes are of this tiny bubbler crab. And what you see on this beautiful design in sandy areas is basically during low tide, they will come out of those holes and they will start feeding on the dead and decaying organic matter from the sand. And while they feed on dead and decaying, they will clean the sand and they will leave clean sand pellets all along. So this actually tracks work as a territory for this crab. Each crab will have its territory depending on its size. This is a slightly larger crab, so it has got a slightly larger territory. But there are two tiny holes here we can see, which has got slightly smaller territories. They are very territorial animals. But every day, millions and millions of these crabs, twice a day, one daytime low tide and one nighttime low tide, they will come out of their holes and they will clean the sand out of debris. I don't think we have seen any efficient cleaner of a beach than this tiny bubbler crab. So I really call them real ambassadors of Swachh Bharat, or our beaches are these tiny crabs. And we need to recognize that you don't have to be a tiger or elephant or rhino to be important. Many times there are these unsung heroes, we call it as, underwater. In our forest also, there are many other species which performs absolutely vital role that sustain all these ecosystems. These are not the tigers and sharks and elephants which sustain. These are these tiny animals which really perform absolutely invaluable role of recycling nutrients in the forest, in the oceans, and to make these habitats habitable for all these charismatic species that we speak about. Then another beautiful bumphead parrotfish. You don't see them very commonly. You will say in India, you'll see predominantly in Andaman Nicobar, in some parts of Tamil Nadu, while you are diving, they're slightly deep water species. So you'll see them usually at about 25, 30, 40 meter depth. Fascinating fishes. Now, each fish is known to produce almost 5 tons of sand each year by breaking down both live as well as dead coral. I mean, of course, is an issue when they start feeding on live corals, but that it's also facilitate fresh growth for the corals. So in the islands, where most of the islands where there are coral sand, these fishes contribute greatly. Besides, of course, sand comes through very other natural processes, degeneration of corals, etc., etc. These parrotfishes play a great role producing very fine and coarse, pristine coral sand out of corals in coral islands of Andaman Nicobar or Lakshadweep. Then we have got this remarkable coast of Orissa, where these 3 important beaches, where more than 1 million female olive ridley turtles come each year for nesting on these beaches. These are called as aribadas, and we have got only about 2 or 3 such sites globally that we have, where such large number of turtles come every year nesting. And it's a site that you must see before you say goodbye to planet Earth. I think it's a sight to be seen, absolutely to believe. Another sight you should see is when these young juvenile turtles start hatching from the eggs. If there are 1 million adults, they come, imagine how many juveniles will come, 100 to 150 eggs every single nest. So out of 1 million nests, there'll be 100 million these juvenile sea turtles coming out. I mean, there's no place to walk actually. It's impossible to walk on these beaches when these turtles start hatching. It's a sight to be seen, absolutely. And there are only two places on earth where this absolute sheer beautiful phenomena happen. Therefore, we are obliged to actually save these spaces for future generation. We cannot allow these spaces to be compromised at any cost, because once it is lost forever. These are not going to come back. They have very strong site fidelity. These turtles will keep coming, females. Once they hatch, again, the beauty of this animal is that once these young ones are hatched, they go to the sea. If it is a male, it will never come back on land. They always, all his life, they will spend life in the sea. But female will come back to lay eggs on the beach, and they will come to the very same place from where they have hatched, maybe some few meters here and there. Such a strong site fidelity these animals have. So protecting these three very important nesting areas, Gair Mata, Rushipulya, and Devi, these are the three river mouths where these sandy shores, these turtle come. They're absolutely no compromise area when it comes to conservation. We cannot allow these spaces to be compromised. The giant clams, where my last almost 3 decades work is on this species. Again, very magnificent animals when you go underwater. They're fixed to one place. They have very long life. They almost live up to 200 years. The largest species known to live for about 200 years. The smaller one live for about 20 to 30 years. They grow over a meter. So it's a very large animal that we are talking about. And it exclusively feed on zooxanthellae. It's a microscopic plant. It stays inside the body, in the mantle of this animal. So it has got a very interesting association. This animal require a microscopic algae in its body for its survival. And I'll speak a little bit about it if I don't know whether I put the slide, but when the sea surface temperature exceeds 30 degrees, all that algae which is present inside the tissue of this animal will leave the animal, and these animals will then become white, snow white, we call bleaching. And if the bleaching continues for more than 3 to 4 weeks, then these animals will lead to mortality, because they absolutely require this tiny microscopic algae in its body for its survival. Sea cucumber, again, I was talking about it when I showed you previous one of the slide. A very, very interesting animal. There is a lot of research going on this particular group globally, because this one animal has got a remarkable ability of regeneration. This animal is known to eject out all its body part, right from mouth to anus, and it will regenerate its body parts in a very short span of a few weeks. They will, of course, throw body parts only when they are seriously disturbed by predators or by, while we handle, you'll see suddenly something coming out of its body. Now, that's a remarkable ability not many animals have. I mean, we know there are certain animals like lizard, for example, if, they shed off their tail to avoid predation, and that tail will come. It may not come to the full size, but they will regrow that tail a little bit. But this animal regrows its entire internal system, right from mouth to cloaca anus, within a very short span of time. Now, the most of the research interest is basically which are those genes which are responsible for such a superior capacity of regeneration. And there may be answer to cure a lot of our gene degenerative diseases in years to come, once we solve this mystery of what genes or what characters this animal has got which allows them to regenerate. So a lot of incurable diseases in years to come, the drug discoveries will come through the oceans. And that is another reason why we have to save our ocean biodiversity, because every single animal that you'll see, and I can give another lecture on drug discoveries in this domain, there are lots and lots and lots of drugs which are either cancer curing or degenerative diseases or painkillers, etc., are coming through this marine drugs or marine animals that we talk about. Box jellyfish, I think it's one of the frighteningly powerful venomous animal that you will see on Earth. It's a very, very tiny animal. If you'll see, the head of this animal will be only a few centimeters. But the tentacles, which really are, carries a venom inside it, they grow almost up to 3 meters. and it's almost transparent animal. So many a times, and there are of course a large number of cases annually across many parts of the globe where people do die because of stings of jellyfishes. Now these jellyfishes don't come to bite you, but most of the stings are accidental while you're swimming, and if this tentacle touches to your bare hand or bare foot or bare body, then it releases highly venomous toxin into your body, and that paralyzes you, and death is almost absolute instantaneous. And unfortunately there is no anti-venom for that. So if you'll see, if you are traveling to places like Australia or Indonesia or Philippines, there are periodic closures of beaches for swimming if these animals are seen, and there are jellyfish watchers in many of these areas, because in a tourism season you don't want these animals coming which are within swimming zones. So there are periodic closures of swimming areas in many parts. Fortunately, we don't have many of these animals in Indian waters yet, but with climate change and sea level rise, we are slowly seeing some of the species of these box jellyfishes coming into waters of Andaman Nicobar. We have not seen yet any of these in Lakshadweep or the west coast of India. At least not to my knowledge. If any other person have recorded, I am not aware of that. But I have not encountered these species yet in my last 3 decades of work on west coast of India. Andaman Nicobar, I heard. I have seen a couple of photographs of not this particular species, but some other species of box jellyfishes. And we have to be very mindful of that. But this venom itself has got a lot of medicinal properties. So there is a lot of research going on these powerful venoms which come from the marine animals. And I'll have last few slides, very interesting slide. This is subject, though not necessarily related to marine, but these animals and birds do use marine scapes when it comes to very interesting aspects of migration. As we know, bird migration is a very, very favorite subject, and I'm sure many of you love bird watching. I know Gitanjali loves bird watching. She started her interest about 2 decades ago in this subject. It's a very, very fascinating subject. Though I'm a marine biologist, I think on terrestrial aspect, if you ask me which subject fascinates me, I think it's a bird migration. The way they migrate from their breeding areas, for example, Central Asian flyway in India, which you see, there are multiple flyways you see in this map. The Central Asian flyway, which covers India, where birds which breed in Arctic Russian region, they come during the wintering time to east and west coast of India and other wetlands in India. I think it's a remarkable story of these migratory birds. I can give entirely 1 hour lectures on fascinating aspects of bird migration. I'm not going to, of course, dwell on that right now, but I'll show you two particular birds, which again amaze me most, is this tiny 110 gram Arctic tern. I mean, what should I say? This tiny bird, which is just about 110 gram, makes round distance trip of 70,000 kilometers from Arctic to Antarctic every year. I mean, what a remarkable animal nature has created. And I have absolutely no idea how they manage to move these distances with all kinds of, besides, of course, the distance. I think the very hard weather that they will have to encounter during this to and fro journey, and how they overcome that is only nature has got probably answer for that. I don't think we have evolved so much yet to demystify some of these absolutely majestic phenomena. Now, this tiny bird, again, Bartel godwit, we now know through satellite tag that they fly non-stop almost 11,500 kilometers in 9 days from Alaska to New Zealand. They don't take break. They just take off. I don't think today commercial flight even have, that capacity to fly more than 12,000 kilometers non-stop. There may be today with the super flyers now, but those are very few and handful of it. Imagine this tiny bird, which is probably weigh only about 400 gram or 500 gram or maybe a kg. I don't know exact weight for this bird, but taking such a long distance migration is a remarkable aspect. And that's one of the reasons why we need to save the spaces with these birds use. And the Spaces these birds use during their long migration when they come from the breeding area to the feeding area. Their feeding areas are our coastal wetlands, mud flats, mangrove areas, shallow intertidal areas. So even if the areas may not be of that great significance in terms of its biological diversity per se, but some of these sites may be refueling sites for these long distance migrants. If they don't get enough food after traveling this much distance, immediately when they land, they will need to feed to gain back their energy. And it is very, very therefore important that all these sites that we have, very beautiful tidal areas that we have, both east and west coast of India, are very, very important for these birds. They have to refuel to these sites. So all these spaces we today talk about, barren lands and barren mud flats, and those are all words used by somebody who does not understand ecology. There is nothing barren on earth. I think earth is full of life. Barren is a word invented by humans to destroy environment with this very goody kind of a feeling that, oh, it's a barren land. There is no land on earth is barren. That we have to understand as an ecologist. Every single inch of land or water on earth has got a value in terms of biological diversity. So I think we have to remove this word from entire dictionary that it's a barren land. And then there are all kinds of other animals. Sooty shearwater, 65,000 kilometers from New Zealand to North Pacific. Then we have got humpback whales, almost 20,000 plus kilometers into various parts of the ocean. Leatherback turtles, there were turtles tagged in Little Andaman, traveled almost up to 18 to 20,000 kilometers, all the way up to, I think, Australia or somewhere near to that region. So all these really are large range migratory species that exist in the ocean realm or in the avian realm, which use some part of the ocean life as a refugia. And therefore, I think understanding this area, I'll stop my presentation. Therefore, I think understanding marine and coastal biodiversity, marine and coastal areas are of great significance. Unless we understand that, we will never do anything to save for those species. And there are some very interesting programs started recently by a number of institutions, understanding that even our intertidal areas are very, very important. As I said, for migratory birds, I think these are the most invaluable places and spaces that we need to do something about it. And that is where I think individual actions will count. We may not be able to solve climate change problem as individual. Collectively, yes, we can. But smaller spaces. Now, for example, there is one area where we have some very interesting, these migratory birds keep coming. I've been visiting this area, and with working with communities, with working with some of those areas, we somehow managed to convince them to stop sand mining into that small area. Maybe it's a little small contribution. I think these are the contributions required where we have to work with people on ground. I think without working with people sitting in ivory towers, I have seen lots of conservationists who do lots of nice fancy talk sitting in ivory towers. That's not going to solve our problems. I think we have to go at a grassroots level, work with people, work with communities. My experience of 3 decades in Lakshadweep has clearly taught me that lesson, that ivory talks doesn't help. It's only nice to give good lectures without actually making any difference on ground. I think these are the real people on ground who will help us save the species. Policies are great. We have all range of policies, but eventually who is going to implement or who's going to ensure that policies are implemented? These are the people on ground. So I think it is very, very important that we have to put our foot on ground. And one of the reasons why I have eventually started my own foundations to we'll work in a very small little domain, not spread thin into all kinds of stuff, but we will take few cases where we will be able to make difference by providing grassroots level solutions for conservation. It's a very limited mandate that we have, and that's what we aspire to do as a part of our very small team of Srishti Conservation Foundation. Thank you, Geeta. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you. It's wonderful to go through the oceanscape or seascape, and like learn so much about. Maybe I mean, from my side, I would request you to briefly talk about the Srishti Foundation and the work that is being happening there. And
It's a very new. We are a startup. We started only last year. We have just completed 1 year. I got a team of 7 people now, and currently we are working in uh, two seascape. One in Maharashtra in Konkan area, uh, especially in mangrove and intertidal areas, and we have got two very large projects in Lakshadweep that where I have been working for 3 decades. You know that I have spent almost 10 full-time years while when I was in BNHS in Lakshadweep. It's my second home, and there I have my own Whitley grant. Plus, we have got good support from Tata Chemical Trust, with whom we are working in that landscape for again community-based conservation. Our idea is to engage community, work on solution by which we can not only save coral reef but also able to sustain through very meaningful livelihood. Lakshadweep is a very interesting place. As I don't know whether many of you really know, but it's a worth area for your team to go and visit. This is the only place in India. There are, of course, similar places in small island nations in other parts of the world, but in India, this is the only place where they still do tuna fishing by pole and line. It's one of the most spectacular fishing practice where you will not get any bycatch into this fishery. It's completely bycatch free. And what we are now trying to do is to see how we can actually do a value addition for that. Because today, almost 99% of the tuna which is caught in Lakshadweep is dried and sold as a mass dried tuna, which they get only about 400 rupees per kg of a dry tuna. Imagine we are talking about bluefin and yellowfin tuna, which in European market or other markets, they will probably fetch 100 times more than what they are getting on the island. The only problem for the island is transport is a huge issue. A good, safe, hygienic canning facilities are virtually not there. If we can actually give them that infrastructure and create a brand for that product, I think the same product today, what they are selling at 400 rupees will give them 4,000 bucks. And we have to encourage those kind of traditional practices where they don't have any footprint on ecosystems, because it's absolutely, and they only catch what fits in their boat. So they are not commercialized their boats. They don't have those 100 feet, 200 feet large boat. They still have that 30 feet boat. The only challenge for them is they require this tiny fish called bait fish, which are sparrow-tilides and some of those groups. Now, those fish are typical coral reef associated fish. So saving coral reefs in a way is an interest of the island community, and they know it very well. So if you go and talk to people in Lakshadweep, never ever they will say that they don't want these reefs or they want to utilize this indiscriminately. In fact, they will never allow you to do that, because their lives are so intricately associated with ecosystem. And I think that is where we have to give those are the interventions actually will make huge difference, because these are the only spaces left for us where we still have large tracts of pristine biodiversity left. We don't have, yesterday I was giving talk on policy for some other group, and where I was talking a bit about forest, and we only have about 4 tracts of forest in this country with more than 10,000 square kilometers of contiguous forest, only 4 in this country. And we have got about some 19 or 20 odd sites with more than 5,000 square kilometers of contiguous tract. That's the fragmented forest we are talking about. In ocean realm, these are the only spaces like Andaman Nicobar, like Lakshadweep, like Angria Bank or Gulf of Mannar, where we still have a great hope for conservation. So we have to make these kind of interventions where it doesn't need rocket science. It just need good interventions, getting good skilled people there to tell us how we can do branding for this, how we can give direct access of that resource to the markets outside where there is a better pricing for that. I think that's what we aspire to do as a Srishti, to make this grassroots level kind of work with communities, give those connections, give those trainings. Training on resilience is something that is now our flagship program. As you know, climate change is an absolute, it's a reality. It's no longer a myth, and it's only going to get worse with time. And I have been talking about this for last almost a decade, that while governments will work to put heads together to see how your carbon reduction, etc., will happen, most of it remains only in talk. Very little happens actually on ground. People will continue to suffer. A common man will continue to suffer. And I think the only way we can make a difference at a grassroots level, where people are not bothered about how much carbon you sequester their agricultures are failing now, or their lands are getting inundated by sea. I think we have to tell them that climate is a reality, and they have to accept this as a way of life in years to come. That's the only way we can deal with and try to find then local solution for this problem. So we are now launching our large program on working with communities, making them understand the real problem at grassroots level of the climate realities, and making them believe and understand that the way of life is going to change. We have to get used to these temperatures now. We were discussing before lecture. 45 is not going to be just a normal, new normal. It only going to keep up increasing. It may be 46, 47, 48. We don't know where it will end up. So we have to adapt. There is no other choice for us but to adapt to the changed reality of climate. And by the time all these global, solutions will come, communities don't have that kind of a time. They are going to lose. In Maharashtra, for example, the project that I talked about, we are actually mapping sea level rise and land degradation, creek by creek, across an entire stretch of Maharashtra. We have analyzed so far 4 major creeks. And in 2 creeks where our analysis is all over, we now know that almost more than 200 square kilometers of productive agricultural land has been taken over by mangrove. Though it is great that mangrove has increased, I am happy as a nature lover, but it is coming at the cost of agrarian, community. And that's a new frontier of conflict that is going to come. And these are the climate refugees. Unless you give them a meaningful employment on the very same land which are now taken over by mangrove, people will cut down mangrove. It's a very short-term glory that we'll have that mangrove cover is increasing. I think we are opening up lots of new territories for human-wildlife conflict that we have still not seen those. And I think that's one of the very large project that we are now started in Maharashtra, started mapping this. And then the next phase will be actually working those areas, give them mangrove-based employment, is to what they can do without cutting mangrove. Whether can we try for apiculture, sericulture, or mangrove pickles, or mangrove jellies, or mangrove tea. All kinds of avenues today exist for that. So how are we going to train those people? How are we going to train those people? Who will be our partner doing that? How are we going to brand those? So those are the grassroots solutions today we talk about dealing with. So our Srishti is basically looking at these small interventions where we can make some difference in a good sense in the lives of common people in our areas of priority areas for conservation.
Thank you. Subodh, you can check on the question answer.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. If anybody has any questions, you can either type them out or you can raise your hand and you'll be given an opportunity to ask your question. Anybody with any questions?
Yeah, so both Jankiram here.
Yeah.
So this the effect of the marine life because of this fishing on the coastal areas, how bad is it?
Well, fishing has been quite a serious issue in last, I think, several decades. We know that in last 4 or 5 decades, with all this mechanization and all these policies related to fishing, we have, well, in a very sorry state of affairs when it comes to what's happening to the fishes. As you know, for example, commercial fishes like pomfret, which I remember when I was a young researcher 35 years ago, we used to get really large size pomfrets, I would say, which can weigh up to almost 1.5 kg or 2 kg. That was the size for black pomfrets we used to get. Now look at the sizes of pomfrets you get. Those who eat fish will know you're talking about today 400 gram, 300 gram, 500 gram pomfrets that we talk about. So we already have over harvested, that the sizes are reducing. There is absolutely no doubt about it. There are plenty of research paper available which are suggesting to us that the sizes of fishes are reducing. The moment size of fish reduces, is fecundity, egg-laying capacity reduces, so the spawn reduces. So what gets added to the population get in less number. And there's a continuous harvesting. Traditionally, we used to close down hunting during the monsoon time because that's where most of the species come in low salinity areas for breeding. Now it's, well, ban is on the paper. In reality, the large trousers continue to hunt and fish in areas. So I think we have all these three different types of problem. We have got biological overfishing, where we already destroyed ecological overfishing. For example, we destroyed most of the fishing grounds by bottom trawling and all that kind of destructive methods. We have ecological overfishing, where fish size is now getting reduced, catches are getting reduced, and we are increasing our efforts because there is less catch. We put more efforts to catch it. So we are actually trying to take even last remaining fish from the water. And then we have economic overfishing. Today, it's all subsidized. That's why you will see it is still been able to do. The moment you take down subsidy from fishing is going to collapse in no amount of time. But above all that, I think fishing anyway will collapse in years to come if you don't look at managing our fisheries very well. I think it's in a very bad shape. It doesn't look that way. Because we are increasing more and more efforts to catch more. So you still are able to maintain that catch number, and your balance sheet shows that, okay, this year we got more than 500,000 more than last year. That's not going to, it's not an infinite resource. It's a finite resource. It's going to get exhausted at some point of time, and our fisheries are going to collapse. There's no question of that. I should have shown. I have not dealt in conservation issues now because I thought they're all very general interest. Otherwise, you'll see the scary picture every day. How many fishing fleets are there operating? Large trawlers I'm talking about, not this traditional fishermen. Traditional fishermen, as in most of the places, has become almost jobless because there's no fish which comes to now shallow areas. It's all been taken out by commercial fishing in near shore areas. Persian, for example, takes out every single damn thing that comes in the net. It's an absolute annihilation of fisheries that we are doing. We are blindfolded to it. We know that, but we don't want to take any action about it because it's a very touchy subject in that sense. But eventually, fishermen are going to suffer. I think we have to understand that at some point of time, we will have to take bold decisions to make sure that fishes survive. If fishes survive, fishermen survive. Fishermen will not survive if fishes doesn't survive. As simple as that.
Thank you, sir.
We have a question on the chat box from Shan. They want to know what is the effect of global warming in corals and intertidal creatures.
Yeah, I think there are a number of areas that we need to look at. Now, global warming, for example, is essentially what we are talking about: sea surface temperature, elevated sea surface temperature. That's what leads to all kinds of complex issues. First thing, in coral reef areas, if there is a sea surface temperature, if the sea surface temperature goes beyond 29 degrees centigrade, then corals will start bleaching. And now we have seen world over that bleaching episodes is happening very recurrently. The last being in 2017 or 2020 in Australia. This year again is a predicted bleaching event, probably in Australia and some of the parts. It never used to be like that in the past. Now what is happening is, in last 30 years, if you see, for example, just Indian Ocean, which is into very hot debate these days because of this increased frequency of cyclones coming. I have been working in Lakshadweep, and our temperature regimes, elevated sea surface temperature regimes, have shifted from 25 to 29 degrees centigrade in last 60 years. We almost, in every summer now in Lakshadweep, we get almost between 28 to 29 degrees centigrade elevated sea surface temperature. It's like a hot soup. Ocean can never be so hot, should not be so hot in the summer. That's what is leading to the bleaching. It usually temperature ranges between 23 to 25. 28 is way too high. 4 degrees is too much of a temperature change in sea. Now, this change temperature has got number of consequences that happens. So what we understand now. It's a very infancy because we never seen so many cyclones on west coast of India. Now that frequency has been increasing quite remarkably in last few decades. And one of the reason people believe, I'm not a scientist in that domain, but I've been reading some of the very interesting papers, is that this elevated sea surface temperature is where, which is influencing this increased frequency of cyclones. We have to still wait and watch for what research further says. But the carbon that is been getting into the ocean, as I said, ocean is a great source for carbon sequestration. The only problem with that is the moment carbon dioxide get dissolved into seawater becomes acidic, and that's where the question of ocean acidification comes. So we have to find solution, and we are exploring another idea which we are currently exploring the funding for that, but that's something we need to explore, where Lakshadweep administration has recently started a very interesting program of seaweed cultivation. Seaweed cultivation happens patchily in India, in Tamil Nadu mostly, but never in the context of climate mitigation approach. Now, seaweed is something where you'll actually harvest carbon from the water. It's an excellent carbon sequestration tool. But the continuous harvest, like agriculture, if you do it on every 3 months, it's a harvest. If you take every 3 month harvest, it also will buffer because it will reduce acidification. It will make water alkaline. So if you do an industrial scale, this seaweed culture in a very controlled fashion into lagoon areas, I think that will help solve ocean acidification. As just an example, there can be plenty of such examples. But wherever we have avenues of these innovative ideas, we have to buffer the impact of carbon sequestration in ocean by reducing acidification. That's the only way. Otherwise, our oceans will be acidic, corals are dead, and it's of no use. So though they sequester carbon oceans, I think bulk of our research should therefore be focused on how we can mitigate the acidification aspect, how we can buffer that and bring that pH level to 7, 8, which is the optimal pH level for seawater. And any R&D, any innovation in that direction, seaweed is just one example. There can be a whole range of other, and therefore biodiversity plays a great role because they recycle these nutrients. I think these are the natural systems. Once that natural cycle is destroyed, that's where our problems start. So we have to ensure that large tracts of these oceans remain unaffected, at least their biodiversity intact. I think that is where these marine protected areas will play a great role in that sense. But developing marine protected areas in India is a huge challenge because of large communities depend on that resource. And therefore, community-based conservation is the only way forward. But we have to look at this. Carbon sequestration potential of oceans is massive. If we deal with acidification issue with different innovative, and that is where I think innovation will come in place. I think that's where young generation will have to put their heads together using technology, using advanced science to see what are other tools. There would be hundreds of other avenues by which we can buffer that acid impact. Then ocean will sequester carbon. Seaweed cultivation is a great enterprise, I personally believe. We should do on an industrial case because that will sequester large amount of carbon. It will also help buffer impact of ocean acidification to great extent. It's not a solution everywhere, but wherever it will work, I think it's a great that we should try.
Right. Thank you. Our next question is from Mr. Ravindran. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good evening all. Doctor, that was a fantastic presentation. My question is something related to Mr. Janikaram's question about the conservation status in the any part of the oceans. Like, in the land, we know that, you cannot lay hands on even a single bird, even it may be a babbler or a peacock, whatever it is. But still we have the commercial fishing going on. So what would be the status if, the endangered animals, get caught in the nets, or how is there any protection or restriction there in the commercial fishing that's there when covering under the Wildlife Act, anything like that?
No, I think, I have a very strong views on some of these provisions of the Act. In fact, many a times Act becomes deterrent for conservation. That's my sense. Putting the fishes into Wildlife Protection Act is practically impossible. It will never have political support, and it should not be. I don't think banning is the best way for conservation. It may work for certain species. It will certainly not work for every species. In fact, many a times we are struggling to save species because they are in Schedule 1. We can't do any intervention unless we get permissions from Government of India. Earlier it used to be very difficult. Now, of course, getting permissions is relatively much easier, and we are able to really do some very good work. But I believe that, and I can give you a classic example. I was part of a number of these committees where sea cucumbers, for example, are banned in this country for harvesting. Rightly so. 30 years ago, situation was very bad. Harvesting was beyond control, and we have diminished their wild stocks enormously, and something needed to be done. So Government of India at that point of time, based on whatever data available, they said all these sea cucumbers should be in Schedule 1. It was needed that time. That time technology was not there. After that, we have now technology where we are able to do captive breeding of sea cucumbers of many species, and it's a very indigenous technology developed by our own research body, Central Institute of Marine Fisheries, which has Central Marine Fishery Research Institute, which has developed this technology. We should use now that technology for two purposes. First, we can actually give this technology to fishermen to cultivate it, and use part of, if we can have a quota system that, okay, 90% of cultivated stock that can be harvested, 10% of that should be sent back to the sea as a sea ranching mechanism, so your wild population also recover while you continue to harvest it like agriculture. We do not have two systems in place. First thing, we do not have that honesty and integrity in place that, okay, this is the quota given, I will only do this much of breeding. So the easiest way is to go out and collect fish. This cucumber from wild is an easy way to go. So we try to circumvent many of these, avenues that are available today simply because we are absolutely callous in that sense. If this becomes a regulated harvesting regime, where we will give, for example, every fisherman small, cages. They don't require huge cages. Small cages is enough to do captive rearing of sea cucumbers. Every single fisherman who is a traditional fisherman can actually grow sea cucumbers in their backyard. They can put 10% back to the ocean, right? 90% they can harvest. We can replenish the stocks in the wild. I would guarantee you, if this happens in 5 years, we can replenish the stock. If you have a quota system, it has to be a very regulated activity under whatever ministry you may be, whether it's environment or fisheries, that's government to decide. But if we allow captive breeding through the technology that is available today, the whole world is doing it. But we are still not able to do that simply because this species is in Schedule 1. I have been in the past very strong advocate that this species should not be delisted. I still believe species should not be delisted from the schedule, because the moment you delist, then you have got all kinds of problem. Illegal will still continue unabated. So that pressure has to be there. But at least for the captive bred stock, we should make provisions in an act that, okay, for this species, technology exists, there is a market, you should do captive breeding. It's just like an aquaculture. The way we do aquaculture for shrimps and prawns, why we can't do it for sea cucumbers? So I think that's the problem with our acts. Sometimes are very, very rigid. We still don't have that flexibility within that. Putting fishes is not going to solve the problem for us. In fact, will create more problem, because you'll not be able to do much work unless you get permissions to do work. So in a way, it's a prohibitive. But I think it's a community awareness is what is really, really important. It has to be sustained. What is happening is, most of the areas where these initiatives are taken, so long there is a donor or there is a money. The moment donor goes and money goes, that intervention stops. It doesn't help in community. You see, the reason why I have been going to Lakshadweep, because I understood that unless you are there with the people for a very long period of time, you will not see change. Otherwise, people know aapko paisa mila hai, project mila hai, then you will come there, you implement, you'll go. Hum log to wahi ke wahi reh jayenge. That's is a real challenge. So whale shark, why it is sustained? For two reasons. That Murari Bapu, who is one of the very respected religious preacher from Gujarat, stepped into and put his weight behind the species. That's influenced a very large section of fishing community in a very short span of time. That we probably wouldn't have been achieved, in 10 years of general education. I think those are the spaces and niches we need to utilize it for the benefit of species conservation. So today, even if whale shark comes into the net, fisherman will cut it net. It will allow for whale shark to go. And we have plenty of those cases. In that case, forest department give them a compensation because there's a loss of net. It's a big loss of money for traditional fishermen. Maybe 30,000-40,000. It's a lot of money for them. So there is a compensation mechanism for that now. But compensation mechanism many times become a tool to misuse. So we have to do fine balancing of many of these aspects. Secondly, I think there are most of these species are where 99% people will not go and see them. They are pelagic. How you are going to monitor what's happened offshore 20 nautical miles from your area? You and me cannot reach there unless you have boats and those kind of infrastructure available. So monitoring is another issue. Therefore, I think it's very important. Therefore, that sustained efforts on working with communities is the only way forward. I personally see. I don't think any acts and laws, will mean anything. If resource is declining, if I have a boat, I have taken a loan for the boat, I have to pay my monthly premium to the bank, I have to go in a sea and fish. There's no question of that. And whether there is a prohibition or that, I don't care, because if I don't do that anyway, I will not have neither boat nor my time meal for the day. And that's the real dilemma in coastal and marine areas. So I think we have to look that through multiple approaches. There's no one single approach of law that will work across the seascape. I think every site has got its unique problem, and our law should provide that flexibility, case to case basis, site to site basis. We today don't have, unfortunately, in Wildlife Protection Act. So I personally feel it's a very regressive law in today's time. It has worked for certain species like tigers, elephants, rhinos, so be it. It probably will not work for any of the marine species. At least that's my understanding. It may work for sea turtle because, a part of their life cycle happens on land. So that's where we have control. 99% of their time is in sea, and they roam distances of 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 kilometers in open ocean. Who's going to patrol and monitor those open waters? So I think community engagement, I personally feel, is the only way. We have to work with fishing community. There's no question of it, because it is their interest that fishes remain, this marine life remains. Otherwise, for us, it's just one-time entertainment to see beautiful pictures, go there diving, appreciate it, see Finding Nemo kind of experience. And so our connection to ocean is only that. The real connection of ocean is with the fishing community, whose entire life depend on oceans. And I think that's where we have to make difference.
We have our next question from Rotarian Narsimhan. I think you've covered part of it already, but I'll just run through the question. He says, can you talk a little about whaling? So I have heard that there are international rules, but still there are countries that are doing indiscriminate whaling. So do you think there is a solution somewhere there?
Well, I think these are the rogue nations, I call them. And these are some of the most developed nations, but I still call them as the rogue nations because they have total disrespect for conservation in some of these areas. I think whaling has to stop. There's no question of that. We can't use any means of justification that we need research and blah, 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 blah. Many a times you don't need research to save species. Sometimes just give them spaces, species will recover on its own. As simple as that. So there cannot be any justification of whaling in my personal view. And I have been absolutely open. I keep writing to these forums that whaling has to stop. That's the only way it is. And I call them rogue nations. Those who are completely disrespectful for this particular aspect. We simply don't have those kind of populations left. Some place because of tourism now slowly in many places, people find there is more money in tourism than hunting it, saving them. So there is a change, but there cannot be justification for whaling.
Sir, just a moment. Can you name some of these rogue nations?
There are plenty. I don't want to name them now.
Okay.
Next question from Mr. Kiran Kulkarni.
Yeah, you talked about the seaweeds, especially last 10 years. Seaweeds in the different form, I don't know what is the processing part of it. It is being sold as plant stimulants or a fertilizer in India.
Yeah.
I
Actually,
don't know what.
seaweeds have got many uses. Currently, it's been sold with a very limited purpose. But seaweed is a very important source of agar, which is one of the basic ingredient in microbiology.
Yeah.
Today, we import 90% of almost 90% agar. I may be wrong in percentage here and there, but between 80 to 90% is imported from China. And I think we have 8,000 kilometers of coastline. Why we can't be self-reliant when it comes to the source of agar? We have plenty of seaweed available. It's an agriculture. We can do that. It's no rocket science. We need to invest in capacity building of fishing community. It can be done by women. In Lakshadweep, in fact, what we are trying to do is we are encouraging women self-help groups to actually take up this as an enterprise. I think we have a huge potential of seaweed cultivation in this country. Unfortunately, what happened is in Tamil Nadu, they started with very invasive species called Cupophycus. I think we should avoid making those mistakes. We still have very, very important native species. In Lakshadweep, for example, we have got 2 very important native species commonly available. We can cultivate those in a commercial sense. I think that's the way forward. Otherwise, people will utilize whatever resource is there because their whole life is around those islands. They have nothing else to do, nothing else, nowhere else to go.
True. Thank you.
Any further questions? I think we are close to wrapping up.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Anybody? I guess, yeah, we're okay to close now. Sanjay?
Yes, Subodh, I was just waiting for the question and answer session to get over. Thank you so much. Am I audible? I think
yes.
there is
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh yeah, thank you. Okay, it was a wonderful session, Mr. Deepak. Thank you so much. In fact, there are so many things that crop up in our mind. I am sure we will have one more session. Janki Ram, our secretary, has already suggested that we should get deeper on this subject and know more. And one thing I also wanted to tell you that Rotary, of course, is a member organization engaged in doing service. So basically, I was talking to you about supporting the grassland conservation. When we say grassland conservation, we are not able to, Rotarians, we are not able to go and work at grassroots level when it comes to conservation. But there are people who are working at grassroots level. And we have undertaken to, support some of those communities so that indirectly we will be contributing to the conservation. That's what we are trying to do. So probably when it comes to your area as well, we can in future we can work on something on similar lines and also take up conservation work. Whatever little bit we can do through Rotary, if we can join hands, it will be we'll be grateful if you can support.
Certainly. Look forward for that, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much. Over to you, Subodh.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. It's my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks for the evening. Mr. Deepak Apte, wow, you've just opened our eyes to a lot of things that we didn't even know about. We get to see a lot of stuff that happens on land, but I think we're all totally lost when it comes to what happens in the depths of the oceans, and our knowledge also, even general knowledge, is quite poor. So thank you so much for awakening us that there is so much more in wildlife that we can look at other than what is on land. We'd surely love to have you back sometime soon to take us deeper into the subject. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. Thank you, Gitanjali, for inviting Mr. Deepak, and also for introducing him to us. Thank you to all our members who have attended today from all over India, and have a great evening. Good night.
Good night. Good night. Thank
Thank
you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye
so
bye.
much.
Bye, Geeta.
Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So Deepak ji, we look forward to have a session, one more session, much deeper discussions.
We will do on a hardcore conservation challenges.
Yes.
This was an
I
introductory
think I'm
talk.
surely going to take you up on visiting Lakshadweep sometime soon.
Yeah. I have an office there in Agati, so I have my team there.
Great.
So usually we open office by end of September, and we close by mid of May. Monsoon will start now, I think, in 10 days. So we stop our work from May to end September. It's very rough sea.
Okay.
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 Thanks.
All right.
Thank you
Okay.
again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Sanjay and Geetanjali, why don't you arrange a trip to the Gulf of Mannar or some other place where he has,
Yeah, I was just telling my family that our next trip will be to Lakshadweep.
We should go. You should come to Lakshadweep. I think it's a lagoon that will which will make your learning very enjoyable. You can snorkel in very shallow water. It's just about 2 meters. So it's beautiful.
wonderful.
Plan something between Jan, Feb, and March. It's a good time to be there. December is a bit crowded. But Jan, Feb, March is a really good time. Sea will be flat, calm, beautiful weather.
We will.
Yeah.
Sanjay,
Okay,
I think,
Gitu.
Sanjay, I think that should
Thank
be for your extended family.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.